Right everyone, welcome back to I hope you're all well. It's December here where I'm filming, and we're about to say goodbye to 2020, which has been a fascinating year to say the least. But yeah, I hope you're all well, whether you're watching this in a few days after I release this, or whether you're watching this sometime after. I hope everything's going well for you guys, and yeah. So the last video we filmed was about MMIs, and today we're going to take a bit of a break from MMIs and we're going to talk about revision. Now, this is going to be a video specific to A-level, but can also be applied to GCSEs in most aspects, and we're going to be focusing in on biology, which is a very common subject taken by a lot of people who are applying to medicine. In fact, one of the two most common subjects, apart from chemistry. So today we're going to be talking about basically how to cut your biology revision time down in half to make your learning a lot more effective. And it's very easy to do, a lot of people don't do these things because there's a stereotype of what revision needs to look like, and that is pages of notes, flashcards, highlighters, and that's not really revision anymore. It's an outdated image that people think about. And what you need to be thinking about when you're revising is how to effectively revise so that you're using your brain when you're reading material and you're engaging yourself, testing yourself constantly to really reinforce the knowledge that you have currently. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into 5 tips to cut your revision time down in half. So tip number 1, understand what you're reading. Sounds very simple, but it's mislooked a lot of times. When you're reading about the heart and when, how the blood goes through the heart, understand what the ventricle is, understand what the aorta is. Try and think about, okay, do I actually know where they are in the heart? Do I know where the aorta is? So that when you're going through the worksheet, every time you read something new, you're actively engaging yourself and you're testing yourself, which is really important because in the exam, you're being tested. So it's really important to understand that you're going to be tested in the exam, so in revision, you also want to be tested. So make sure you do that, that's very important. Okay, tip number 2, don't write reams of notes. Note taking is interesting because it can be useful. The only time note taking is particularly useful is in 2 cases really. The first case is when you're in a lesson or when you're watching a video and you want to take notes on it because you can't go back to the lesson and you obviously don't want to keep watching the same video over and over and again. So if you want to make notes, keep them brief, only take the main points out or things that you think will come up in the exam, and don't just basically write a transcription of the lesson or a transcript of the video. Make sure you're only taking out small bits of the lesson. Make sure you're understanding the lesson and breaking it down into smaller, easier to read lines. So something that you're going to understand when you read the notes. Tip number 3. It's a really interesting one that I've picked up recently, but I love it. It is really helping me a lot, and it is basically to do a bit of research on every new term that you come across. So let's stick with the same example, movement of blood around the heart. So we start off obviously at the right atrium, so we've got blood there, and now it enters a valve. So before we read anything about the valve, whether it's a bicuspid, whether it's mitral, whether it's tricuspid, what type of valve it is, let's do a bit of research on valves. So if just 5-10 minutes, take time out, because it's a new term for us and it's likely to come up in the exam. We want to know a little bit about it. So first of all, go on, anywhere, any website, just have a look at what's the definition of a valve. Then do some background research. What does a valve look like? What's it made up of? What are the names for different valves? Where can you find valves in the body? Why are they shaped like they are shaped? Think of all these questions that they could ask you. If you want a really top grade, they're going to pick out different terms in your A-level or GCSE and ask you questions about it. So, maybe in A-level, a B grade or A grade would be enough to know that a valve, is where blood passes from one section of the heart to another section of the heart. And, it only allows unidirectional flow. But if you really want to get an A or want to aim for that A star mark, what you want to know is background information about the valve. What's the shape? They might ask you, what's the shape of a valve? For 1 mark. But that 1 mark is likely to differentiate between A grades and A star grades. So you want to really know enough about the valve to give you a strong understanding. So just go and do some background research. Go above A-level grade, go to university, go to professional level. Just try and build up some background information about a valve. Now this is actually a good time for me to do a segue into Notion, which I spoke to you about last time, and Notion is a fantastic note-taking. I'm not going to go into detail about it here because they're not sponsoring me.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
But, however, I would say that Notion is a great tool to use because it has a function called toggle, and this is where you can use that background information. So when you enter a new term into your notes, or when you're trying to revise a new term from your notes, and you do a bit of background research, just a small amount of 5-10 minute research into that term. So a valve, what is a valve, what is it shaped like, why is it shaped like it, why is it important, always ask these why questions. You can use the toggle function to basically put the term, and then you can click on it and you'll show all your background research on it, and you can click on it again and it'll disappear. So it's really quite useful to do that. Or you can use the page function, so you can link it to a separate page about valves and you can do research on that. But I would highly recommend doing this. Make sure you do background research on new terms you study, or terms that you see, okay, that's something that they will ask me about, that they could potentially ask me about. I'm going to do some background research on that. Cross-link topics. You're doing biology, I'm assuming you're probably doing chemistry. If not, this works within biology as well. Make links between topics. For example, when you're learning about photosynthesis, try and link this into greenhouse emissions if you're learning geography. Or biology, there is a section about greenhouse emissions. Link it to that. If you're learning about respiration, try and link it to ventilation. Understand why the two processes are different and how they interlink. So when you have ventilation, you're obviously talking about the physical processes of the lung and how it expels air, how it takes in air. Respiration is the chemical process in cells that generates ATP. So you want to understand when these two processes are linked and when they're not linked. And by making these links, it's much easier to revise, and it really cuts that revision time down because you actually have to understand the concept. But also make sure you're linking it to other subjects. So, chemistry and biology are lovely because they intertwine so often. So by using your knowledge of, for example, isomers, you can understand a lot about why different chemical compounds express themselves differently in the human body. You can understand a lot about ATP and ADP in chemistry, obviously. I can't exactly remember, but I know it does link in quite well to structural formulae, molecular formulae, and it basically makes it a lot easier to learn, both in biology and chemistry. So it cuts down your revision time in both, because you're sort of learning one topic, which is going to come up in two different subjects. So make sure you're doing that. Make sure you're taking efficient notes, and it builds on that what we spoke about note taking. Efficient notes means that you need to be using active recall, so you need to be writing questions down that you can come back later and think, okay, so what's the answer to this question? Blah 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 blah. So you're basically relying on knowledge that you've built up. So as opposed to writing down, for example, photosynthesis is a process which generates oxygen and glucose from carbon dioxide and water, what you want to note down is What you want to note down is, why is photosynthesis so important to the environment? Now, this is different. It's testing the same thing. You still need to bring in that formula, but when you revise from your notes, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be looking at the question, and you're going to be thinking of an answer. Now, that makes you have to think. If you just read that photosynthesis is the process of blah 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 from blah blah blah, it's just going to go in one ear and come out the other. You're not actually engaging yourself. You want to write down questions instead of writing down sentences. So always go for questions instead of sentences. In the same way, testing material is very important. Make sure you spend 50% of your time, I would even say 70% of your time, on past papers, past questions. This is the utmost best way to get A stars. Use past papers, use different board past papers, use the student room past papers, use any past papers that you can find. Use them all. Do not waste a single past paper. People say, oh, I'm not going to do them, I'm going to save them for the exam. I never really like that because, you say you're going to save it, but then you find so much more past papers, so many more materials online in the build-up to the exam. So you've left yourself with 2 weeks, and the past papers obviously, but you've also left yourself with 10 other past papers that you found online. I would say as soon as you find a past paper, do it within that week or the next week. Just do it. It doesn't matter if you haven't learnt the topics, just try it. It's the most important thing. And the thing is, it's sort of like once you've done it, if you do it really early, for me, I would forget the answers and I could retake that paper, in a few months' time. And I basically would recycle papers on and on. And even if you don't forget answers and you remember them, that's great. That's the point of doing past papers. You want to remember these answers. In GCSEs, a little secret here, they like to recycle questions. You will find when you're doing past papers, hang on a minute, this question came up in last year's paper, or 2 years ago. You will start to pick up on the questions that start recycling and going again and again and again. And you'll start to focus on those questions more. So I guess that's
My apologies. I couldn't hear to submit.
Pick up on questions that repeat. There are going to be questions that always repeat themselves, so make sure you're going through those questions. The mark scheme is there and it's all good, but it's not everything. He wants to see how you write your answer out, and that's what they'll write on the examiner's report, especially for those big mark questions, those 6 markers, those 15 markers that you might have in your board specification paper. Make sure you're reading the examiner's report, highlight it even, keep notes of it in your note bank, keep important lines from each paper from the examiner's report, and make sure you implement it into your answers, and that can help you get really good marks. Awesome, everyone, so hopefully that was useful. If you found it useful, like the video and subscribe, and comment down below if you want to see anything else. And if you've got any questions about this video, or if you want to see anything else in the future, do let me know. I'm always here and happy to take advice, anything you want to say. Just feel free to drop it in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next video.